We will now have a joint presentation by Victoria Castro and Mauricio Uribe. Dr. Castro is Professor Emeritus at the University of Chile. She was a consultant to the UNESCO panel that designated the Inka Road as a World Heritage Site and an advisor to the team that created the National Museum of the American Indians exhibition, the Great Inka Road, Engineering and Empire. Mauricio Uribe, also an advisor to this project, is an associate professor at the University of Chile and serves on the advisory committee of Argentina's Archaeological Heritage National Monuments Council. Doctors?
Good morning. Good morning, Ramiro and Doctor. We are very grateful for this wonderful accomplishment of Ramiro and the whole team of the museum here. Thank you, Jose. Today, I am so happy to follow the excellent presentation of Christian. We have absolute agreement in terms of the need for an interdisciplinary, holistic, and open look that we need to have to be able to understand the indigenous and Inca cultures. This initiative that we are seeing being kicked off today with so much success gives us the possibility to share our understandings with the public and with our colleagues, but primarily, I would say, with the public. It's very important for us as professors to talk about what we're doing and let people know about it, and to have this privilege to be able to share our work with many people. Because a lot of times we end up talking to each other a lot, and we listen to what each other is doing in our work academically, but we don't have the opportunity to share it more broadly. So this initiative is a wonderful initiative, along with the success that we're seeing in the exhibit, and it's going to open many doors for us to be able to move forward with our knowledge. We're looking at the map of the Tawantinsuyu, where we can see that there are two primary axes that bring together the road. There's the Mamacocha, which is the Great Pacific Ocean, from Pasto in Colombia all the way down to the center of Chile, in Santiago de Chile. And we also have the magnificent Andean mountain range. It's a young mountain range, and it still has this possibility of human beings were still able to do magnificent work there and to leave this great artifact for us. So this is such a huge artifact that no one can play with it in their home. So with this road, we go through various landscapes that are, on the one hand, natural landscapes, what nature has put there, but through the Capacñan, the road, there are also cultural landscapes. They are steps that human beings took and continue to take today. And that builds a narrative, builds a story and elements of meaning in such a way that there is no space that doesn't have a name, that doesn't have a particular meaning, and especially it's giving us an immense amount of biodiversity so that Andean human beings can exchange resources and products and to have a self-sufficient system of life. And that was all possible thanks to the Kapangnan, built on the base of many other roads. I want to talk about John Hislop, our great friend, who was able to categorize and systematize this map of the Inca Road many years ago now. And in some ways, this has allowed us to get to know the magnificence of a world that no longer exists and that was wasn't subject to the various political pressures of the republics which came later. So what we were saying is that there's so much continuity that there was a great drive for his work led to more work in the future. Now, in Colombia, for example, the pre-Columbian Hispanics had a great number of well-made roads. And here is a zone where there's a great deal of vegetation. It's not a low jungle area, however. It has some connective areas, and it was cleaned periodically. And today, there are populations living there who are using roads and systems left by the colonial system. There's also Afro-descendant Colombians who are living in this area. The Kapangnan also, we're going to show you more photos, it also crosses areas of highland wetlands, very high mountains, the place called Ceja de Selva. There's an area in Peru. And in Peru, we also have very large valleys that are closer to the coast, like the Valle Cañete, where you have this wonderful place called Tambo, Colorado, which was a way station. And it was very colorful, yellow, red, and white, with all of the meanings of those colors. And even today, you can see that place and you can walk by that area. So there's a number of different environments, different resources that are very present, and different populations that live in the area. So we're talking about an incredible diversity, both population diversity and cultural diversity and natural diversity. Now, we also have the place in Bolivia where the great Camino Taquesi goes through the vegetation here, through impressive ravines, very large ravines, and also it goes along the edge of Ururaca that Christian just mentioned, near the snowfalls and the glacier of the largest mountains of this wonderful area of Bolivia. But neither Bolivia, Peru, or Chile there's this tremendous area that is all part of the Andean America. And things began to get more complicated with the invasion. And so there were diplomatic agreements made, different ways of looking at the world. And so the remains of how people used to see the world, how people used to live the meaning of the earth and feel the meaning of the earth, that is still present, however, among the Andean populations of our countries. We have here a different territoria. It's Alta Tuna in the Arica zone, where we have an impressive number of like 200 facilities or 200 medicinal plants, all kinds of resources that were used by the indigenous populations of the area, and that are in very high areas where you still have a little bit of vegetation, where you can still find symbolic sacred plants that were specifically to worship the mountain, to worship water, etc. We also have some areas that are very remote of this road. We have this lateral road that is near the current highway of the Arica-La Paz highway. There's a very monotonous vegetation, no more than 7 species, and there's a segment of the Inka Road here, but it's very important. And it's this territory is sort of near Peru and Chile, it goes down the coast to Arequipa. And finally, we get to the highlands of where you have about 4,300 meters above sea level. And in this area, everything is like grazing land for llamas and other animals. And there's a very sacred mountain that's nearby. And that's where the Incas lived. And of course, there was domination and power of the Incas over this area. We also have the places where the road connects the eastern and western sides of the Andes, which is the case of San Pedro Atacama. There's a tripartite area where Chile, Argentina, and Bolivia all share borders, and where you have a lot of movement of the population. And then there is the mountain of Licancaul. When we went with Ramiro in March, it was totally covered with snow. Now I want to talk to you a little bit, especially after what Christian said. I think we can incorporate a lot of the same elements. We've had some working groups to study the Inca Empire even before the existence of the UNESCO initiative. And with Carlos Albenate, Vanina Alvalera, we have developed a kind of research strategy where we've had guiding axes. One is ethnoarchaeology, which is simply taking into consideration archaeological hypotheses and also the contributions of ethnography and of the current populations that live there. And in this context, we have on the one hand everything that's called oral history, that we're able to get through their stories in the world where they live in now. And that was all connected by the Capacñan Road. And we're also studying what remains of the native language. As you know, in the southern hemisphere, there are just few of the native languages remaining because the formal education has been deeply disarticulating of the idea of the diversity that exists. In Toponina, we have 3 languages of the Andean South: Quechua, Aymara, and Pulsa. And of course, there are many people who speak Spanish as well. And in the context of the landscape, the cultural landscape, and the resources of each place. We're talking about the names, what they mean, the plants, what every plant, every animal has meaning. And so we need to look at all of these things. Then we also, there's a collectivity of the human beings who are alive today and who still have a social movement and relationships through these old roads. In our space, Mauricio here is going to emphasize this a little bit more about this territory. And he's going to talk a little about, for example, there are signs that show the crossroads, and there's also there's landmarks, and there's some hypotheses here that there may be some constructions that have to do with astronomy, but we don't know. And then there's the driest part of the entire planet, and often there's very harmonic landscapes there nearby as well. And then there's some spaces that current communities are using, like this part of the road that people travel on frequently with the patron saints. Now, the patron saints are an important part of Catholicism in the Andean world. And they are given roles. Each saint has a role. And so there are some of the Catholic saints subsume some of the indigenous Andean concepts of deities as well. Santiago, for example, is a representation of one of the Andean deities. Here, right in the middle of the desert, we have carved rocks that go towards the mountains. But the Andean human beings, we can say, are very spiritual, but also very practical. And there's a lot of minerals in these hills as well. So how do you explain the existence of the minerals in terms of the ethnographic narrative? The sacred masculine mountains make it so animals take the wealth of the masculine hills in the night over to the feminine hills. And that produces the distribution of the mineral wealth and other kinds of wealth. As Christiane said, this world is still very much alive. There was an elder who said, my body is the world. My bone are the rocks. My blood is the river, and my flesh is the earth. We also have roads that are not cobbled, but they go past small way stations and they link one watershed with another. This one is going towards San Pedro Atacama. We finally get to these two catarpes, and there's a local population settlement in each place. And on the other side, on one side there was the local settlement. On the other side, there was the Inca settlement. So we have our way of looking for how to explain many elements that we don't understand. And so we make a few working hypotheses. For example, we say that the local traditions and stories can orient us to research the road and to discriminate between different types of routes, through morphological traits. The people there know the roads, they know who made them, in what period, what they're made out of, the kind of technology that was used. Some of the elders are called engineers because they have very specific knowledge about how to build these roads. And so we know that there's also existence of Inca and pre-Inca roads. And so in terms of how they were used, there's a very important person here, and that's Juana Ayaribiri of Yatire Tocono, and she's sharing much of her understanding with us here in this picture. Christian has talked a lot about this already. This Inca movement throughout this road is very fundamental because even today, the peoples talk about the myths. The Incas had ways to produce water. They had ways of transforming the landscape. And if they didn't have these roads, how would they have moved about? With Mauricio, we've published kind of a new kind of study where we were able to rescue certain kinds of archaeological pieces of stone that existed in the 8th century. And it looks like the Incas were playing symbolically with these kinds of materials. Sorry, not play, but they were giving lands away. And so there's a lot of work that's very practical as well as the theoretical work. And as Christian said, this is a living world. The Incas are there. They're conversing, the people say, in the mountains. And they're always concentrating power, concentrating their mineral and metal wealth. The mountains have this wealth that they lend to human beings. The mountains are providers of water and so on. And of course, you have this marvel that's hard to explain. With the union of production spaces with mining, the mining and agriculture and water production, the Incas were working on all of these levels. And the marvelous things, as people today still have these stories that they talk about in the tales that they tell. For example, this is a Tawantinsuyu that is 26 meters long, 9 meters wide, made up of adobe, which is very different from the town, which is made of stone. And there's a big field in front. And they say that this is the house of the Inca. It's about 3,100 meters over sea level. And they say that the Inka Road goes right through there up to the Paniri volcano. And here, you have a path that the current populations are still using. The Virgin of Candelaria, they take through here in her pilgrimages. And she presides over the Caspana community and presides over the ceremonies having to do with planting and with agricultural production. Today, people use these roads, and they use it for the entire cycle. Now, we don't have time to talk about all of it, but there's an agricultural cycle that begins in July and goes to July, or begins in January and goes to December. And people are constantly on these roads. There's a longitudinal axis, but there's also many associated roads that go off to the sides. There's active customs today. Some things that were being practiced in the 1500s are still being done now in terms of community work to clean the canals. And here is a group of people who are living in the territory of Sulipe who are working together. So how would they be able to communicate with each other if they didn't have these roads? How would they welcome the strangers and the helpers who come to help clean the water channels? This is very different here from the rest of Andean America. So the people here, if they have water, they're happy. And that happiness doesn't have to do with consuming, it has to do with the idea of well-being, the idea that everyone has what they need. And we're not talking about socialism or anything like that. It's just a different category entirely. It has to do with family unity, the ability to get together. And so in that sense, people clap for the water. They applaud the spring in this ceremony. The mountains are also providers of water, and they also have gardens, not just gardens of green plants that we see in other spaces, but also gardens of an immense variety of colors produced by metals. And they're together with the water, together with the earth. And so the mountains have absolute power to manage the lives of human beings. So this complex relationship that sometimes seems simple happens because these peoples did have a holistic version of the world, vision of the world, and a way of perceiving culture and life and way of life that was integrated, holistic. And that's reflected very early on in a drawing by the chronist Juan Santa Cruz Pachacuti Yanqui Salcamaya. He draws this world, which is a portal where you see reflected the sun, the moon, the stars, the world below, the world we live in, and the reflection of the world where human existence continues. I'm going to leave it here so that Mauricio can talk about the portal from the past to the present and systems of water.
Muy buenos días. Bueno, vamos a continuar esta titánica tarea que nos encomendó Ramiro.
Let's continue with this titanic task that Ramiro entrusted us with to conceptualize the Tawantinsuyu, but out of Cusco, and to show its dimension, and to show the mosaic from the sky, mountains, to land, to populations. And in this regard, I would like to jump from this portal to the past that is present in the Andean region and therefore is not an independent or separate world, even though it has its own autonomy and its own life or spirit, so to speak. Without any doubt, such as Victoria just mentioned, on top of the academic aspect, it's impossible to separate our observations into different disciplines. This picture in the highlands and border between Chile and Bolivia could represent this whole combination of disciplines, this synthesis of elements, where we can see a Christian, Catholic actually, church, probably from the 18th century, where we still see different elements of Christianity, but that is very similar to the one drawn by Santa Cruz Pachaguniwanki, where we see the cross, the oval, the rainbow, the mountains, the diamonds that represent the Tata Inti and Tata Sun, stars, moon, in a contemporary context that is periodically renewed. In this world, we see all the worlds combined. Portals are permanent. So in this world, we will go from one dimension to another, and this is how we can see and experience the beauty of the Tawantinsuyu as a collective work of millions or thousands of people, women, men, children, that go beyond Cusco. I am specialized in the southern part of the road, and that is what I will be focusing on, just to show this new dimension, this wealth. Therefore, my presentation will be focused on also on the archaeology that combines all these elements, but that is found in the southern part of the Inca Road. As everyone has said, yesterday and today, roads are very important. They cross the whole Andean region. And you can really, and this is very important, especially in the Atacama Desert. These are the old roads, pre-Inca roads, where you can find the footprints of the llamas crossing the desert, and how we see different axes whose main reference is the Andean mountain range. Roads are described in different chronicles, especially those that get to Chile as a very arid areas, sometimes difficult and dangerous areas, mainly because of the desertic nature of the southern part of the Inca Road, and specifically the Atacama Desert, where we find very arid characteristics, very difficult conditions there due to the lack of water for hundreds of kilometers. However, thanks to the Tawantinsuyu, this became a habitable area. We see the road going through Bolivia, Argentina, and obviously Chile, which is my area of expertise. We know that in Chile, the road has a very specific orientation. It goes from the northern part of the country, the border between Bolivia, Peru, and Chile. Then this network crosses the mountain range, takes us to the desert, and then it keeps on going again to the middle part of the country, where it links all the different valleys that have a little bit more water, and then the network takes us all the way to the southern part of the country, where there is much more water. Specifically in the central area of Chile, where the capital is located, Santiago de Chile, we see a high concentration of archaeological sites. even though the road is harder to see, we understand, given the amount of archaeological sites that it went through this, and you can actually trace it following these sites. And now, in order to show you this great achievement, I would like to share some great examples. The most northern part of the country, the border with Peru and Bolivia, is where the road starts in Chile, mainly in Putre, in Arica, the Arica region, where we find the Apus or Malcus glaciers, the current villages in the valleys, and then this water basin. And the road takes us all the way to this other area with landmarks, and they're linked to the Apus directly, and the current use made by the population in these areas. With regards to this stretch of the road, we would like to highlight some of the areas, such as the stone trails that link the different parts of the country that are very important in terms of the Malcus or Apus and current populations. We have the tambus, such as the Tambu of Sapawira, where there is a series of kolgas or warehouses that have been preserved. And they can be they're being restored so that they can be visited by the public. The tambo, the capagnan, the kolkas, all those are distributed throughout the whole road. And here we also have certain dates, thanks to research and analysis that were conducted from, and they go from pre-Columbian times. And then we see different populations that make use of this network. We can see this through the ceramics that we find, the pottery shards. So typical Inca Paca ceramic or Inca Cusco ceramic that we find in the southern basin of the Titicaca. Then we see the different villages of the Sierra that are 2,000, 3,000 meters high, all the way to the coast. And these valleys were very fertile and therefore good for growing and therefore for being populated. This is the type of pottery that we find in coastal valleys, in the lowlands, offerings to their rulers or representatives, and these are clearly related to Cusco through the imperial ceramics of this other type of ceramic called saxama. We see different routes, not only the north-south route, but also the horizontal ones that basically weave all the different populations together. They link all of them. This is in the Isluga region. We find also mountains, Camaray, among others, that are fighting over the love of another female mountain, the Serakirikima. Therefore, they're in constant dispute or fight. Heads are beheaded because of this woman that stole their heart. This network also allows us to access lower valleys. Here we are in the Tarapacá region, where we have different sites in Inca architecture, very imperial architecture. We even find villages or towns, quite significant ones, such as the Yactas. They also linked coastal populations to those in more inland. We find also different ceramics, the Inca imperial ceramic or the Saxamer ceramic or pottery that is characterized for this type of design. They are very characteristic of this type of ceramic, this type of pottery, this style. Also, in this area, in the Tarapacá region, it is very important to highlight the access to the sea. This is even a current issue nowadays, access to the sea. Incas established here one of the most notable archaeological sites, the Cerro Esmeralda in Iquique, which is one of the few ones that has been preserved on the coastal region. This is 900 meters above sea level, and it's located on this hill. And it included an offering of 2 women that were sacrificed with all the imperial paraphernalia, fabrics, pottery, metals or metallic objects, muyus, and different types of offerings. They are one of the most northern and coastal capacuchas. This road could be linking the Tawantinsuyu with the Conasuyu precisely because of the linkage with the coast. If we keep on going south on this western road, we get to the southern part of the Atacama's desert, and we get to the oasis of the Rio Loa and San Pedro de Atacama, the Loa River. We see a clear trail marked by stones or rocks on either side of the road, on both sides of the road rather. Then there's water, also very important, especially in the case of this desert. Water is vital and absolutely necessary also for agricultural production and for settlements, human settlements. We see a series of landmarks that are linked to the different mountains. Basically, they mark the different directions that you can follow. This one is the Paniri population, the Kupo population or town. Then farther north, we have the Loa towns, and then those that could be in the Caparaca. Here we are in the southern part of the country. This is the trail that links San Pedro de Atacama or Cancabur, shown by Christian and Victoria, and it takes you to the Atacama region with almost no people living there because it's the most arid part of the desert. However, we find a series of monumental and archaeological sites. The Cayanca from Turi, very important building where part of the social and political ceremonies take place. Usno in Cerro Verde with stairs is is located in an area called Caspana and has a mine nearby, or the double plaza, which is part of the imperial architecture. Then here we have San Pedro de Atacama and the Loa River. We have a concentration of this imperial architecture. And this will facilitate the transition towards the or mobility towards southern valleys in Chile, colonial Chile. And here we have the convergence of other populations, the Inca population, which we see through the imperial style of ceramics, or then we have the Argentinian ceramics, or the Diaguita style of pottery that will also prove the presence of Inca populations. And we also have ceramics or pottery from local populations. Then we have the trail keeps on going to Copiapó, keeps going south. And we see that it goes through different local populations that keep on adding elements to these different tambos that allow the road to go through the mountain range to the valleys. We have the Coquimbo Valley in the south. Then we have some dates thanks to different analysis. And what is interesting is that some of the ceramics are of the same time of what is happening in other areas of the Tawantinsuyu. They are not from other, like later on, they are contemporary to what is happening farther north. Then we have crops such as the ones used to produce the Chilean pisco. All this infrastructure is linked to the Inca presence. Again, we have imperial ceramic and as well as other types. We have a group that will support the northern conquest in the northern part of Argentina or central part of Argentina. There is also lots of findings related to mining and Incas. We have the canchas or colcas in this case of this site called Viña del Cerro in Copiapó. We have the basis of the wires of melting sites, sites that were used to melt copper or iron, represented by usno, by this usno. Mining activities were quite intensive. We can see different types of hammers here or stones to that were used to crush the material. We have pre-Inca materials as well as more recent ones, smaller scale mining activities working in this area. This is in Coquimbo too. We have other apus and other malcus, where ceremonial platforms will be located to do offerings in this territory. Then we have the semi-arid northern part of Chile, Copiapó and Coquimbo. We find a great concentration of Inca objects and sites and remainings. This pottery will be found throughout the whole territory, and it's evidence of the expansion, an expansion that will reach the center of the country, the current Chile, and all the way to the capital, Santiago, where the road will get to the Tambo of Mapuche, the river valley. Currently, crosses the city of Santiago, and we find a great concentration of evidence from the Tawantinsuyu. Specifically, what we would like to underscore is the integration of different populations, productions, technologies, such as in this case, funeral with local Inca pottery, which combines local elements with Inca elements. And this will get all the way to the Cachapoal Valley. It will get to what they call the Araucanos, or which is the border where settlements will take place. There is evidence of a great deal of ceremonial activity. Many mountains will be marked by this presence, where we find this type of objects, where we know that ceremonial activities took place, evidence such as the object that we have on this slide. They prove that we're not talking only about war that takes place here, but also diplomacy. And with this other cultural space, the Mapuche world or Araucano world, which is the other indigenous population located in this area. The Capacocha, in the southern part of the region, is the Cerro El Plomo. This is a glacier. Even today, there is no rain in Santiago. We probably need another Capacocha there. And is characterized by having one of the most important human offerings that are preserved to date. And they are evidence, again, of this integration, community work, collaboration, linking the different populations in this area. Women, men, children that are building what we call the Tawantinsuyu, a great Andean region, and the one that integrated Latin America, at least on this side of the Andean mountains.
Well, we're more or less on time. Let's take a short break, about 15 minutes or so.